Hello everyone, it's Vincent from ProtoPie, and we lately received a request from our community to record a tutorial on how to build a button state or the different button states inside of ProtoPie. And in this tutorial, we will be building those button states together. And first of all, let me show you what the output will be. So you can see here in ProtoPie, and this is the preview window, and you can see we have two buttons here. And just to let you know that I got it inspired from the app Duolingo, and this is kind of style of the app. So once I hover over the tips button, you can see we slightly decreased the bottom opacity, and once we press the button, then we just hit the shadow, the button's shadow, and when I release, the shadow is here again. And for the practice button, now you can see it's disabled, so if I click on it, basically nothing happens. And we have this checkbox. This is not available in the Duolingo app, but I just added here to show you how to use a component from the material library inside of ProtoPie, and also how to use the receive trigger and the send response in order to affect the button that you created in ProtoPie also. So now again the button is disabled, but once I check the box, you can see the practice button is enabled again. On hover, we slightly decrease the button opacity, and when I press on it, we kind of have like the same effect as for the tips button, but we have a slightly thicker shadow here than the tips button, right? So yeah, let's start building these components together. So I have this other ProtoPie file where I created the UI. So basically this tutorial will be mostly focusing on how we create the behavior and the button states. Alright, so I created basically this whole UI inside of ProtoPie. So you can see here we have this container, and inside of the container we have this mask rectangle here, and the reflection basically is just three rectangles rotated 45 degrees, 315 degrees. You can see here in the inspector. And for the buttons, we have a group buttons here, and we have a button filled component and a button outlined. Alright, so if I click and double click, let's see, if I click on the practice and click on the go to main component, then you will see all the UI here. So we only have text, and we have this background that has a white shadow with 40% opacity and 5 on the Y position. And the same for the button outline. We also have a text and this background with 0 opacity for the fill. It only has border and a shadow with 2 on the Y position. Alright, and then I placed these two buttons into my scene. I just grouped them, and then I placed this checkbox component that you can grab it from the material design UI kit. So I'll go into the library, then you can see here we have the checkboxes, drag and drop, double click to edit the text, and then you'll have the same as I do here. Let's get rid of this one now. Alright, cool. So first of all, let's start by creating the states for the practice button. So I'll go inside of this component, and the reason why I have those buttons as components is because I might use them like in other scenes. So it would be like way easier just to have all the animation built in the component. So I can simply drag the button and place it in any other scene, and it works perfectly, instead of keep copying and pasting all the triggers and responses, right? So for this button, what I want to do, like as soon as I press it, I need to hide the shadow first, and then I need to move the button 5 pixels. And why 5 pixels? Because you can see here the background has a shadow with 5 pixels on the y axis, right? So I will select the button filled component, and then let's add a touchdown trigger. And on the touchdown trigger, I will select the button background, and then I'll add a shadow response with a 0% opacity. We can, I think it's better to remove the duration, so let's keep the duration 0, no need for a transition here. And let's also add a move trigger, move response, and then choose the button field, and let's move the button by 5 pixels on the y-axis, and let's also remove the duration. Cool, so now if I preview it, you can see once I press the button, I think here, so here it says like move 2, right? So here if we choose to move by 5 pixels, you can see now it works, because I only want to move this button by 5 pixels, right? So now if I press it, you can see the button moves down and the shadow is hid. But again, if once I release the button, nothing happens yet. So now we need to create the touch up trigger, and then let's copy the shadow and the move response. Whenever you see this orange color for the trigger, it means the trigger isn't targeting any layer yet. So I will click here and select button filled. Now let's add for the shadow again 40% opacity, which is the initial opacity, and let's move the button by -5 pixels. Right, so now here you go, we have this nice animation, and basically it's the same animation that we have in Duolingo app. Now we need to add the hover action. So let's select mouse over and select the button filled layer, and let's choose opacity for the whole button filled component, and let's try to decrease it to maybe 70%. Make sure it's always best for the opacity response to choose an ease out easing instead of ease in out. Let's try to keep the duration to 0.1. And now we need to do the same for the mouse out. So let's select the button filled. You can simply copy the opacity response, paste it here, and then increase it back to 100%. So now let's try it out. Once I hover over the button, you can see the opacity decreases to 70%. And once the mouse is out, then it's back to 100%. I think 70% is a bit too much. Let's maybe try 85. Yeah, a little bit better. Maybe 90 is even better. All right, cool. So now we have it. Awesome. Now we need to make like the same thing for the button outline component. So I will select everything, copy, double click on the button outline component, and then paste everything here. Now, as soon as everything is selected, I can simply select the button outlined layer from this dropdown. And now for the shadow, I will select both responses and I'll select the background. And for the move, let's first check the shadow here. So the shadow has 2 pixels on the Y. So on the move responses, I will choose, instead of 5, it's 2. And here move by -2. And let's keep the opacity the same. All right, it's selected. And that's it, guys. Now you can see the opacity once I mouse over and mouse out. And if I click, now it works. But oh, okay, so there's one thing that I missed here. The opacity here has 100%. The shadow has 100% opacity. So instead of 40, we need to make it 100. And now it's working perfectly, right? Now, if we go back to our scene here, you will see that both buttons are working. So I click on this practice button, on the tips button, everything is working as intended. Perfect, cool. So now let's try to disable the practice button and only enable it after I check the I agree to the terms and conditions box. Now, since this is a component from the ProtoPie material library, then it works, so I can check the box and uncheck the box, but basically this isn't affecting the button yet. So let's start by doing this now. First of all, for any component that you get from the ProtoPie libraries, either the Material Design UI kit or the iOS UI kit, you can simply select the component, and you can see here in the inspector there's this small icon like a note or something. You can just click on it and just check the guide. Like here it says you can use the channel receive from component, and then you can receive this message that says checkbox checked and checkbox unchecked message when the checkbox is unchecked, right? So in order to receive these two messages, we need basically to add a receive trigger. And from the channel, I will select receive from component because I want to receive that message from this specific component here. And I will select the target component, which is checkboxes. And then let's choose checkbox checked. All right. And I will duplicate this receive trigger. And now I want to receive the other message, checkbox unchecked. All right, so now I do have 2 receive triggers. And now since the button, like the practice button, is also a component, so in order to for this checkbox component to communicate in a way with the practice button, we need to use the send response. So now once I add the send response, I need to select the channel, like where am I sending the message that I'm receiving here, which is checkbox checked. So on the send, I need to select, basically I need to send the message to a component, and the target component is the button filled. And here I need to select the message, the same one, not the same one, basically I can just type any message. So let's say now here I'm receiving checkbox checked, and this means enable button. right? I will copy the send response and paste it here. And since this is receiving the checkbox unchecked message, then I need to send disable button. So you can type anything here, just let it make sense in order to once you go into the component and you start receiving those messages, just to understand like why are you receiving that message, what's the purpose of it. So let's just collapse these triggers here. And now let's start by receiving those messages. So I will choose receive from the parent, and I will choose, now you can see the messages that I'm sending from my scene. I can see them here. So I will choose enable button. So once I receive enable button, I need something to happen. So basically we can do this like in different ways on how to disable and enable the button, but we can also make use of the variables in ProtoPie. So let's try to create a new variable and let's rename it enable disable button. So now when I receive enable button, I need to assign to the enable disable button variable the value of 1, and I can here just type receive enable button just to make it clear like what I'm receiving, because sometimes when you have like a bigger project, you'll have a lot of triggers here, and then it will be like too hard to differentiate between them. So now I need to have another receive disable button trigger, and I need to receive the disable button message. And when I receive this message, I need to assign a value of 0 to this variable. All right, so now we're done with setting up the triggers, the responses, and the variable. Now I need to change the button UI or the button colors basically based on the variable. So now I can start by detecting the variable, and now we will use the conditions. So if the enable disable button variable is equal to 1, then the opacity of the button field will be 100%. Let's keep it 0.2 duration. Let's make it easy out. Now let's duplicate it, and the condition now will be if this variable value is equal to 0, then the opacity of the button will be, let's say, 70%. All right. And now what we want to do again. Okay, so now first of all, let's check the behavior here. So now, of course, I can press the button, but now you can see once I check and uncheck the box, now the button is disabled. But of course, it's still missing like some other things. But you can see now if I uncheck, check, now I'm disabling and enabling the button again, right? So let's go into the button field component again. And now what we want to do, first of all, let's expand all these triggers. And I only want to allow these animations to happen when the button is enabled. So we can add a condition that says when the enable disable button variable value is equal to 1, and let's copy it and paste it here. Let's move all the responses underneath the condition. And now if you go back to the scene, you can see now I can, let's try to, okay, so now the button is disabled. The animation doesn't happen, but once I enable it again, the button is enabled and you can see the animation is happening. So when it's disabled, nothing happens. When it's enabled, here we go. So there's only one more thing left that we need to take care of. You can see as soon as we load the prototype, the button is enabled, right? And so basically and the checkbox is unchecked. So we need to fix this behavior. So inside of the button field, so here we can basically, let's see, if we add a start trigger, and then we could assign the variable or assign a 0 value to the variable. Let's see if this works. Okay, but no, it didn't work. Let's see how I did it in the previous one. Alright, so on start, okay, so we can simply copy this one. So what I previously did is, instead of adding or assigning a 0 value to the variable, so on start I added this condition. So if this variable is equal to 0, then decrease the opacity to 60%. Now we have here, let's see, it's 70, so let's make it 70. %. All right, now it should work. Cool, it's working. So yeah, you can see the button as soon as I load the prototype, the button is in the disabled mode. If I press it, nothing happens. The tips button works because we didn't disable it. And once I check the box, then the practice button is enabled again. And if I hover over it and then I press it, all the animation is happening perfectly. If I if I uncheck the box again, then the button is disabled again. Nothing happens. Cool. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this prototype. And please, if you have like any questions, follow my channel and just add your question to the comments below. And I will do my best to answer you as soon as possible. So yeah, see you on the next one. Thank you guys.